Welcome to listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan, a podcast about the art and hobby of miniature painting. I'm Mike, and thank you so much for joining us on our continued quest to become better, braver, happier painters. Now, technically, we're still on break till March 17th when we come back with the episode about Irish fairy tales and miniature painting, but we wanted to throw some content out there to make sure you didn't forget about us. This is a fantastic interview that we had with James Otero from Siege Studios over in the United Kingdom as we continue our international art party. It's really interesting to me to see how markets are different, etc. And so while we have had American commissioned painters such as Mini Masterworks and John McAvoy on, we now have the opportunity to have a conversation with Siege Studios and James in order to see what's going on in the UK and how the business might be different there. So without further ado, Dan and I are pleased to present an interview with James Otero of Siege Studios. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me, so thank you.
Now, before the interview, we started talking about a little bit of the craziness of the world of COVID and quarantine. So how have things been going for you in the United Kingdom?
Well, yeah, it's been, to be honest, it's been, very, very difficult. Like, I think we've had 3 lockdowns here in the UK, and I don't want to jump into politics. So I'm not very political at all, but like the reality is that we've been told one thing and then the next thing and then so on and so forth. So we've kind of had to kind of like, I think not specifically just about business, but I think as a community and as a society, I think we just had to try and do the best that we think is morally right, if that makes sense. There's not been like that much sort of like clear sort of like, you've got to do this or you can't do this or you've got to have this or you've got to be a certain way or whatever the case may be. As a business, like this year's been super busy, like super busy. But at the same time, like not having the normal infrastructure that we would normally have as a company. So like, you know, all the office staff, apart from myself, working from home as much as possible. Obviously anyone who has to physically be in the building, like for example, with shipping or packing and things like that, being in the building, but any digital tasks like media production or, you know, management of the team or whatever, painting, obviously, all those kind of things has to be done from home, which is just, it's like losing the internet and losing your mobile phone and trying to communicate with people, because when you're in the office, you can just look across to somebody else in a different department or talk to one of the artist managers or whatever the case may be and go, oh, this needs to be done, or there's this that we need to talk about this. Whereas it's like, oh, have you got time now? Are you in the middle of doing something? And it breaks down the whole process of having the team centrally in the office. It makes it a lot harder. So yeah, like it's been interesting, like very, very busy. And extremely interesting. And for this year, I say this year, but obviously still thinking with the 2020 hat on, like my job has become increasingly more to be a fireman rather than be the normal thing that I do. And just, you know, luckily I watched, there's a kids program in England when I was a kid called Fireman Sam, and I watched that plenty enough. So it prepared me for what I had to do last year. So, you know, it's just, you know, it's been a very, very interesting year. And let's just hope that we all get through this for everything, not just toy soldiers, as soon as possible. So, yeah.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't reference Thomas and being a useful engine, you know, right?
Yeah.
You know, take me back. From when I was reading on your website, you started in the world of miniature painting around 9 years old.
Yeah. Well, so I started in 40K. Like I got into like Warhammer and discovered Warhammer at 9. But my grandfather was in the British Army during the Second World War. And he essentially got me into Airfix kits from a very young age, about 5 or 6. So I always say this is a bit of a joke, but I was sticking the wings and on backwards on Spitfires and things from a very young age, you know, not following the instructions, you know, etc. So yeah, I was always doing models as a kid, and even before that, like my parents didn't really buy me like loads of toys as a kid. Like during summer, they put me out in the garden with a long roll of like blank wallpaper, 6 paints, and I'd just sit there merrily for hours on end, just painting in the back garden rather than being a nuisance, I suppose. So I've always kind of had some kind of painting aspect to me, I imagine. Like, you know, in school, I was very much into art and all these kind of things. And you know, I had the break like everybody else did. You know, I was in music, I was in touring bands, you know, for many years, and then came back to it after that all finished, and we didn't get as far as we were hoping to get and all that kind of stuff. but yeah, so my nan bought me my first bag of Warhammer from a charity shop, and it actually turned out to be some second edition sort of models and sort of Rogue Trader models, like just some metal space. I saw soldiers with guns, and I fell in love. So so that's kind of like where the addiction kind of started. And my mum will always blame my nan for getting me into painting toy soldiers, but never mind. So that's kind of where that's kind of where it started. I used to obviously do the whole thing where you go with your friends down to Games Workshop. You make friends, obviously, from, oh, I'm doing this. Oh, I do that. Or my brother does that. I might do that. And then you get your friends into it and all that kind of stuff. So I had a good sort of group of friends doing it when I was a kid. We used to go down to Games Workshop every weekend on the Saturday and Sunday, play games down there, buy loads of models, which kept the store manager happy, all those things. And then essentially, I was in school, I was painting models still. Like some of my friends would then started asking me kind of like, oh, do you want to paint this for me, or can you paint this for me, or so I started getting it, like I started getting like people asked me to paint stuff at a young age, and then obviously went to secondary school. I was at secondary school, obviously sixth form, all that kind of stuff, done all of that. And then I had a big break. As I mentioned, I was in music for many years, in touring bands, while working in around touring and kind of stuff like that. I worked in recruitment. So I was recruiting for different people in like mechanical and electrical engineering sort of roles. Band finished after many years. And then I came back home to my room in my parents' house and went in the loft, found my Warhammer and fell back in love with it all over again. So that's basically kind of how I got started into it, and that's kind of like my dive into the swimming pool that is Warhammer.
Right. So in that you've rediscovered Warhammer, what made you decide to want to take your painting to a higher level instead of necessarily tabletop, but kind of go in that next step?
I think what it is like I've always had a bit of OCD, I think, about doing things the best I can, or being as neat as I physically can, and taking, if you're gonna, the way I look at it, and I always talk about this, is like the one thing that you're investing into painting miniatures is time, and and you don't get that time back. It's the one commodity that passes us by. It's not physical, and you can't physically hold it or manifest or do anything with it, but it passes us by whether we spend it wisely or not wisely. And I think for me, it's like, when I was painting, I was like, right, well, I'm not going to get this time back that I'm painting. So if I'm going to paint, I'm going to try and paint to the best of my ability, if that makes sense, because I want to push myself. And I've always been very driven. I've always tried to sort of achieve things and better myself and learn from mistakes and things like that. So that's why I kind of always have tried to do that and push myself as hard as possible when it comes to my painting. That's why I got interested in competition painting from a very young age, because I personally, and I think this is quite true for most humans in whatever it is that you do, sports or anything, when you're in an adverse situation, or when you need to rise to an occasion, you grow more as an athlete, or grow more as a painter, or grow more as an individual through adversity and difficulty. It's something that I say on the courses which we teach, the physical classes when we could teach them because of the pandemic. But your comfort zone and complacency are your enemy, because if you stay within those things, you're never going to progress as a painter. You're never ever. You need to be pushing the envelope every single time. And that's kind of where my mindset comes from when it comes to painting. It's that I'm spending time on something, so I want to do it to the best of my ability. And that's what spurred me on at a young age to push and practice and try and become a much better painter.
So is there a technique that you felt was particularly challenging to learn? Getting it, between glazing and layering, or contrast, etc.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think like one of for me and through my journey of painting, I think there's been several key points where I've tried things and failed at them, and then practiced it again and tried again. And specifically like all paints are very, very different, and you need to learn each paint individually. They're kind of like people. They have their own personalities. They may be made by the same manufacturer, but they're very, very different, if that makes sense. Some dry matte, some dry satin, some have better coverage, some have better pigment displacement. There's loads of different things with paint that you have to learn. And I think that was the thing. It was the learning of certain paints that are useful for certain tasks. So, for example, like with layering and blocking in and getting solid base coats on miniatures with a brush, not obviously an airbrush. I mean, we use airbrushes and I use an airbrush, but when you're doing it with a brush, it's getting the right consistencies to allow smooth coverage, combining it with obviously the paint flowing correctly on the surface of the miniature, and and all those kind of things. And on top of that, you also have these personalities that individual paints have, that some will need a slight better dilution or slightly more dilution, for example, to get that right coverage and consistency and finish result. So that was one of the first hurdles, I think, for me, was just starting to learn and master different behavioral properties of paint and what they're better on. I never believe that there's a rubbish paint. I firmly believe that there are paints that are better for certain tasks and that are worse for certain tasks. Just because a paint is no good for a certain thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not good for another technique or other purpose, if that makes sense. So definitely that. So understanding paint and learning consistencies to get different results and finishes and so on and so forth. Blending was a huge step up for me. Like when I properly learned how to blend, and I'm not talking like wet blending, I'm talking layer blending, where you add really, really thin layers to get subtle transitions and so on and so forth. Me being the OCD person I am, I find wet blending very uncontrolled. Like you have to get two wet bits of paint, move it together and hope that they merge into some kind of transition. Whereas when you layer blend, right. Yeah, when you layer blend, you get a very, very a very controlled process, and you can add less or more depending on what kind of transition or finish or look that you wish to achieve. So that was a huge step for me. And on top of that, it's always been, I think the third thing that's been integral to personally for me as a painter, perhaps developing or pushing myself, is just really becoming more and more refined. It's very easy to be messy and to put things on quickly and to be rough or unmethodical or uncontrolled. I think mastering refinement and pushing to be as neat and as sharp and as tight as you can to sort of highlight lines or recess pin shading or all these different things. When you are in that mindset of I must paint the best I can, you're always going to grow the most, in my opinion. And I think that that's one of the things that, with the mindset that I have and the way that I paint now, painting will increase. It has to increase because you're always trying to better yourself, if that makes sense. Again, if you're comfort zoning, if you're complacent, you're never going to grow. So I think they're the three things. It's understanding and learning paint and the dilutions and the behavioral properties of many different paint manufacturers and paints within those ranges. Blending, getting smooth blends and transitions by layer blending, not wet blending, and then also just learning to become more refined and more controlled and developing brush control. I think they're the three things which are very important.
Okay, so now in this context, kind of critique your own work. Where is an area that you feel like you need to you want to improve as far as your painting techniques go? I mean, for me, it's all the above. Because I still, when I wet blend, I make mud. I'm like,
we're all yeah. I think probably anyone who knows me knows I'm like the biggest Blood Angel fanboy ever. So not painting red is the first thing. Yeah, that's the first thing, is not painting red, because I do that all the time. Looking at my shelf in the office with all the Blood Angel models that I've painted. So not painting red is the first thing. And that's what I've been trying to do over the 2020 and this year is not paint red.
There is nothing wrong with painting space vampires. Okay. There's
I know.
Soldier Space Vampires rule.
I know. I have. Not that your listeners will see it, but I have the ultimate space vampire right behind me. So, yeah. But the thing is so this is what I tried to do through 2020, is try and paint as much stuff that doesn't involve painting red. And I think it's always a quest to just improve as much as I can. Like I think I really, really like adversity, and I like things being difficult because it just makes me work harder. And once you've put that effort and graft in, it becomes the norm. So you're always jumping over the next highest hurdle, if that makes sense. I think something I'm weak on, and I'm more than happy to admit my weaknesses, like text, like scroll work and stuff like that. Not specifically like the really tiny stuff that isn't actually text but looks like it. I mean, like actually getting concentric, super sharp writing on like scrolls and banners and names and things like that. I think that's a great weakness of mine, and it's something that I really, really do. I've got a project which I'm doing at the moment that involves some of that, and I'm really, really putting in a lot of practice on loads of spare shoulder pads and things to make sure I get it exactly how I want it to look and how it should look, if that makes sense. it's something that I think, you know, it is really, really pushing your brush control and trying to make you as concise and as neat as possible, understanding the you know, the spacing, making it look like it's spaced correctly, getting the central letter in correctly, getting the bookmark letters in, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's something that I've been very weak on in the past. I've not been happy with anything I've ever done writing wise in that sense. And I think it's the next hurdle for me to try and master as best as possible for me where I am now.
Yeah, especially in the context of Space Marines and purity seals, you know, I mean, my God, they're all over the place, right? but I got to tell you, though,
Yeah.
GW broke my heart. I was so excited when I heard Death Company Primaris, and then I saw them, and like, those are just intercessors. What the hell?
Yeah.
Come on, put a little effort.
Yeah.
But they'll make it up to me.
Like I have.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. No. Sorry, sorry. There was a tiny bit lag. Sorry, apologies. But yeah, I agree with you completely. I was a little bit underwhelmed by them. I thought, you know, I like the Primaris range. Don't get me wrong. Like, I do. There are like the Intercessors are a lovely kit. Like, there's some really, really cool models from the Primaris range. However, some of the models I'm just not a big fan on at all whatsoever. And also, like, I understand why, from a business perspective, why the models aren't as multi-part as they used to be, because I understand how it can be difficult to get like the poses to look good straight away off the bat when they have like a ball socket waist connection, if that makes sense. But I think part of this hobby is the modeling aspect of it, and getting those poses and adding that narrative and character to your miniatures for your personal collection is something that's a little bit overlooked now, in my opinion. Like, I think like the new Primaris range, as good as they are and as good as the sculpts are, like the sort of the midsection of the model being fixed in a certain way, everyone's armies tend to look the same now with Primaris. It's the same model in the same pose, and you've only got like two options per model, if that makes sense, in the way it can be posed. So I think personally for me, I would rather have a kit that still has that multi-part aspect to it, whereby you have the waist connection, and you don't necessarily have to have the front and back of the torso be separate or whatever. But I think they've missed a trick at really making the kit as convertible as possible, and that's really evident with the Death Company kit. Like, you know, as a massive Blood Angels fan, the Death Company should be charging at you, or should be doing, you know, absolutely berserk motion, and to have them in a very fixed, almost not full of rage kind of pose just doesn't really, you know, it's like on the box of a DVD having it be an action film, and then when you put it in the DVD player, it's a kid's cartoon. You know, that's the only way I can explain it. You know,
Right.
it doesn't. They don't look how they would be, in my opinion. And I've seen people convert the assault intercessors that came with Indomitus. I think posing and the true multi-part aspects of the kit, I think, you know, all well and good for starter models to have them in that way, but the proper kits, the full kits, should be properly multi-part, not front and back of torso and legs attached in. Do you see what I mean? I think they've missed a tiny trick on that, personally. But I understand from business, and as a business owner, why making the models easy and not a barrier to entry, and not a big sort of Everest to climb for a young child is why they've done it. And I do get that. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping they make it up to me with Primaris Sanguinary Guard. Then I'll be okay. Like, if we get like real good size, and if they tweak the wings a little bit, because that's the one thing always drives me bananas about that kit, or the wings on them.
Yeah, I don't put the wings on mine. I don't. I think it's really funny. Like, I get why they've done it, because they're supposed to look like angels and all of that, blah blah blah. However, these guys are the best of the best. If they're in combat with those giant wings on, they're going to be swinging around like maniacs, and the wings are going to be hitting either their brothers, or they're going to be hitting the enemy with their wings rather than their weapons and getting in the way. It just seems very, very, very cumbersome and awkward. So on my ones, in my personal Blood Angel army, I didn't stick the wings on. They've just got the single thruster, small jump pack. They look really sleek, really sort of like, you know, they're fast, if that makes sense, and that's the way that they look. You know,
Exactly.
So yeah.
So, you know, I got to tell you, I am not familiar at all with the world of commission painting. So I'd like to dive into a little bit of that. But what kind of turned the corner for you to say, you know what, from miniature painter and gamer to I want to start a commission painting business? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, not a problem at all. So like, when I came back from being in bands and touring, I essentially came back to my parents' house, got my stuff out of the loft, started painting again. And at that point, I've always been, again, as I said, I've always been some form of artistic in doing painting or doing different bits and bobs. And I just started recording some videos on YouTube, like some tutorials and sort of like, oh, here's my models, blah, blah. And I got a little bit of a following on, and I'm not like a massive YouTuber or anything like that, but I got, a decent amount of subscribers quite early on, like, about 500-600 subscribers or whatever. And I had a little bit of a community where people were like talking to me about stuff. I had a couple of guys approach me and say, look, we've seen what you do. We'd love to talk to you about perhaps, you freelance painting for us. I was like, oh, okay, like that, So, so obviously I was none the wiser. That's kind of first sort of understanding of commission painting in the sense of it doing it within the industry. And I'd done some work for them, but obviously I was full-time recruitment consultant back then, working sort of like 60 hours a week, blah, blah, whatever. And there were things how things were done with the way that they would deal with clients, and it was extremely unprofessional. I was painting models for real sort of like hardly anything at all whatsoever. Investing lots of time doing it and not getting that much of a financial return, or not having the professionalism that should come with a business transaction, if that makes sense. So it was almost like in my day job having like a super corporate, regimented, you must do it this way, otherwise there's loads of things that could have negative things that could happen. And then within that, it's being essentially the same thing, a business transaction, but it being completely separate and not done that same way. So I just decided to start my own business doing commission painting, because I wanted to, I thought, well, if this is how it's done, I can do this so more professionally, incorporating all the things that I do on a day-to-day basis for at that point, 9 years of recruitment I've been doing. That I can run things like a professional business and do things that as a consumer I would expect or would be new to, because it's not been not happening currently in the industry, if that makes sense. And that's kind of like where Siege came from. So I actually started painting under the name Siege Studios in sort of mid 2012, kind of like mid to late 2012, all the way through 2013. And then at the latter part of 2013, I essentially saw that Matt from Mini Wargaming was looking for people to paint some models for Mini Wargaming. So obviously I had some photos of my work. I sent him an email, and I thought nothing of it. I didn't, I then get an email back saying, oh yeah, we'd really love to use you and get you to paint some miniatures, and in return we'll do a video for your painting. I was like, oh great, that'd be brilliant. I'll get my models that I've painted on a big channel. That'd be brilliant. So I did it. I sent the models off as part of their I think it's like Masters of the Forge Mini Wargaming chapter, I think it's called. I can't remember what it's called. It's green and yellow with some silver accents. Really, really cool color scheme. And that was it. So I sent the models off, done it. I've done a whole army for them pretty much. And then one weekend I was going up to a tournament at Warhammer World here in the UK, and it was like a weekend Battle Brothers. I think it was like 600 points per person on like your duo team, like you had 1,200 points in total. So first day went by, it was brilliant, and then on the Sunday I woke up, my phone was going crazy, like literally, like it was going absolutely mad. And I was like, what is going on? So I checked my email, and I woke up to like 1,500 emails plus from like, oh, I've seen your video on Mini Wargame, I've seen your painting, I'd love you to do some painting for me. Oh yeah, blah blah. And then it twigged. It made me, I realised, I was like, well, they must have put my email address in the description, which I checked, and they had. And that's kind of like the sort of the spark that happened. Like, I was like, right, well, I can't deal with this all on my own, and I was living in a tiny little flat above a chemist's, where I've been doing Siege, like as a little business side hustle to my full-time recruitment job, so I got some of my friends that were in the competition circuit that were doing to help me out and to start with working for the business. I went, right, well, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to contract everybody as a freelance artist, going to do it all professionally, like a professional business. And then obviously that's where it went on. We obviously got more and more work, more and more people started coming on board, as in like I started recruiting for just, rather than just a couple of my friends working for the business, it was just people that had applied for the adverts that I put out for freelance team members. So it's like, from that point in 2013, 2014, I registered the business and incorporated it in August of 2014. We've obviously now 8 years down the line, we've got 42 painters that work for the company. We've got an office of 7 staff now that work in the office. you know, 2 floors of a building here in Wickford in Essex in England. And you know, and it's just, you know, I am consistently humbled every single day, week and month by this company and where it's going, and the amazing people that I get to work with on a day-to-day basis, in the sense of the team that we're here at Siege, and also our clients as well. It's been a bonkers journey that I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, couldn't even dream for. You know, honestly, I feel so privileged to wake up every day and do something that I consider my passion and love, as opposed to a job. Obviously, it's work to me, but it's even more than that because I love it. So yeah.
That's impressive. You know, I know there was at one point there was some controversy over the mini wargaming, the way they kind of did that commission versus, you know, like, we can't pay you, but we'll advertise you type thing, consent thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think your story is kind of, I think Dan and I kind of fell on 2 different sides of this. And I was more of the, you know, if it actually does generate business and the artist goes into it consensually and knows what's going to happen, then, you know, that's a business decision they're making.
Yeah.
And it seems to have really paid off in that context for you, for sure. And I think I remember seeing the video where they launched their, you know, their painted army. And I was sitting here, like, I'd heard of Siege Studios before, but I wasn't sure where. I'm wondering if my brain was recalling it from their video. Yeah,
possibly. Yeah, I mean, I just like to say, obviously, I was aware of that controversy that happened, and to be honest, meant that whole thing was many years after I first obviously worked with them, and we've done numerous projects in the early days, so 2013, 2014, 2015. But quite frankly, I'm very black and white in the way I am as a person, and I'll always be direct and honest about stuff. I wouldn't have the business that I do if we didn't have that initial launch for mini wargaming that we did back in the day. And I've said that to Matt's face when I saw him at Adepticon in 2019. Like, you know, again, I never got the opportunity to thank him face to face for giving me that opportunity and giving Siege that opportunity. However, I would say that obviously, as you quite rightly said, if the artist or company, whatever, goes into it voluntarily, understanding that what they are getting in return, is free advertising, essentially, you know, then that's fine. But like, I understand why people would have an issue with not getting paid. I do get that, but again, and this is where it's a bit of a grey area, and this is what I talk about obviously within the industry, and when I talk about the commission painting industry, and it is very much like the Wild West. That's the way I describe it. I always have done. There's no regulatory body, there's no governing body, there's no one that sets standards, there's no guaranteed this is what tabletop, or this is what above tabletop, or this is what competition quality is. Like, there's no metric to analyze that. And before you even talk about anything like that, like the thing that you are selling as a company or as an individual when you commission paint is time, as I mentioned already. Like, experience as a painter is just time invested over many years. All right. It's like anything. Like, and some people disagree with me on the one I'm about to say next, but I consider commission painting a trade, like an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter. You do have to have training and go on courses and all those kind of things to learn and develop that skill. However, as a miniature painter, you spend years practicing and getting better and better and better, which is no different other than a piece of paper saying you passed an exam to what electricians, carpenters, and anyone else goes through. So I do see commission painting as a trade. It is experience and time invested to be able to do something. And it's your choice as a commission painter or as a painter how you spend that time. And if you wish to, I'm going to paint this for my friends, I don't want anything for it because I'm painting for it for my friends. If you give that away for free, that's your choice and your prerogative. As a business, if you put a price on that time and sell it, that's also your prerogative, if that makes sense. And I think that because we come, this industry is very different. And I've said this in many interviews and stuff, and I've talked to people before, like, our industry started, with the greatest respect to Games Workshop and to everybody, it started by hobbyists setting up a business. Obviously, you wouldn't put Games Workshop and the word hobby in the same sentence, really. They obviously produce hobby products and they produce hobby items, but they are a business. They're on the FTSE 250 here in the UK. They're on the stock exchange. There was an article today, funny enough, that went up saying that their company is worth 3.9 billion or something like that. It is not a hobby. Like, and a lot of people, unfortunately, because its roots as an industry started within John and Fred in your shed, if that makes sense. Okay. people assume and still see it as that many years down the line. And unfortunately, there's loads and loads and loads of people who have started businesses in this industry and unfortunately run it as a hobby or have that hobby mindset when it comes to it. I come from a recruitment background, as I've already mentioned, and I'm very much business driven, corporate, and all those kind of things, and try to do things as professionally as possible. So for me, going from recruitment into an industry that's very hobby orientated and doesn't have that commercial nature to it, it's a very strange, that's why I say it's a very weird and interesting industry, because I run Siege like a professional business and like a corporate entity, which is what we are. However, on a day-to-day basis, I'm talking about space marines and Tyranids with my customers. And I love this chapter because of this character or because of this. So it's a very, very weird mix of, we're a professional business, but we have these conversations which are really deeply enriched narrative from someone's passion or hobby, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the issues come for a lot of people, is they feel that they're giving their time should be covered, which is correct. If you do choose to sell it as a commodity, and time can be sold as a commodity, you pay for lessons to learn how to drive. You're paying for someone's time, which is just experience. You pay, it's no different from that at all whatsoever. And the last thing I'll say, and I don't mean to, I can talk for England, as I'm sure you can tell, but I don't want to chew your ear off. But the reality is that this industry, like, I'm specifically talking about commission painting, like, people enter into it thinking it's going to be this amazing thing that, like, you get to paint all these models and all these cool things, blah, blah. The reality is you will paint stuff that you don't like. You will disagree with client specifications. You'll have to do stuff that you don't necessarily like or enjoy because that's what the client loves. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that. And they get into it thinking it's going to be this really easy thing. And it isn't. On top of that, and the last thing, which is, it's not regulated, as I mentioned. Like, you know, there is no, in carpentry, electrical work, or it's the only trade globally that is a trade that has no accreditation or regulatory body, if that makes sense. So for us as a business, and I know in the States and in Canada, Australia, it's not really used, but we have something in England and Europe called Trustpilot, which is a third-party review platform. Okay, it's internationally recognized because it's used in loads of different countries. We are the only company in the industry to have a Trustpilot, which is a third-party review website, and humbly, we have a 95% rating on there. Again, you're never going to have 100%. There's always people that perhaps don't agree with something, or feel that something's not right, or their expectations haven't been met, but then they haven't written down something they want, or whatever the case may be. The reality is, to have, as an 8-year trading business, a 95% rating on there is something that is some form of accreditation, which makes us obviously the professional business which we are, and that's what I would say. Like, that's my whole synopsis on the industry, what commission painting is, and I didn't mean to just vomit that at you, but the reality is I'd rather explain it as warts and all, black and white, as I physically can, because that's how I am. So yeah.
No, I mean, it's some of the things you said are very interesting, and like in my head I'm going through, okay, so there's no accreditation, but there are competitions, and that helps, like winning a competition is something you put on your resume to attract people in. And so there's a whole, it is, it's always just interesting to me, because I could never, I did one project for somebody that was 25 models for their D&D game. It was the most painful experience in painting I've ever been through in my life. I can barely paint a squad of 3. So, like, the concept of doing a commission work to me is like, yeah, I would probably leave the hobby. But there are people that can approach it from a business standpoint, like it appears that you can, and also separate it and go, you know what, I'm doing this business side here, and now I'm going to paint on my own for myself an artistic piece and enjoy that as well.
Exactly,
so, and that's something I had a couple of years ago, somebody had asked me to do a commission, and I thought about it for all of 10 seconds and went, no.
Yeah. No, it's not, as I said, it's not for everybody. It really isn't. Like, and you do, it's not like, again, a lot of people get into it thinking it's going to be this thing they're going to love, and everything they're going to do is what they love, and blah, blah. And the reality isn't. You need to understand that there will be days that you'll paint your favorite models, and you'll paint stuff that you absolutely fall in love with and just don't simply want to send back to the client as much as they paid you, everything, blah, blah, because you love what you've achieved and done. And then there are the days, there are the jobs that you just hate. and it is, and that's because we treat it like a job. And I've got to be black and white with you, but the reality is that irrespective of not liking the scheme or not liking the miniature or not liking whatever, you are paid to do a job and finish a miniature, and you do it to the standard that the client has paid for, and also the specification that the client is requesting. And it's as simple as that. And you have to understand that there is with sugar, there is always salt. That's the way to explain it, So yeah, that's the best thing I can say on it.
And that's interesting that you pointed out the standard thing is that's one of the things that always, there's such a broad spectrum of what a standard is. And I noticed like on your site, you have like bronze, silver, gold, then you have like display, and then like platinum display as well. And so how did you kind of come up with those? Because I see people that post stuff, like I see something from like a Sergio Calvo, and he says, "Oh, this is tabletop," and I'm like, "Well, shit, that's better than any display model I've ever painted." So like, shut up, And then you see stuff that's much on a much more manageable in context for me of what would be a tabletop painting. So for Siege Studios, how did you come up with your formula?
So like many years ago, like as I've already mentioned, like painting tiers or levels are just time, a greater time investment. That's what it is. What it is that you have a foundation of the quality that you wish to paint to. So whether it's very, very clean, very sharp, it's a stylistic approach to it, and all those kind of things as well. So that's the starting point, if that makes sense. Our levels, just really quick synopsis, and not trying to do a super hard plug. I'll just explain it as it is. Bronze for us is a premium gaming. It is an above tabletop as a minimum standard. That's what we offer as our very minimum standard. It's an above tabletop quality. Silver is what we would call our display quality. Gold is box art, so pretty much what you see on the cover of the box, that's quality. And platinum is a competition quality. It's the quality that is entered into competitions at the top tier, if that makes sense. Here at Siege, again, we have 42 painters, all of which are competition finalists, winners, ex-heavy metal, and we've got Slayer Sword winners that are in the business. We have, as I said, multiple Golden Demon winners that work for the business. That amazing complement of staff which we've got that paint for the business, it would be a discredit and disservice to them to paint what under that, which essentially is a tabletop level, if that makes sense. That is essentially the modus operandi of Siege. We are a premium painting studio painting super high levels. Bronze, silver, gold, platinum. Back in the day when I started Siege, nobody had those names for levels. And if I'd been, the one mistake I made is I didn't make copywritten level names, because that's what I should have done. All right. Okay. Obviously, many years have passed, and you will see there are, again, remaining professional. Those names have been copied. All right. Okay. Quite frankly. And just because you go to X place and they have a silver or have a gold does not mean you are getting what our gold or our silver is, if you follow me, if that makes sense. Again, there's no regulation. It's completely one person's level is one thing, one person's level is another thing. And that's exactly my point on what you're saying about Sergio Calvatore's tabletop, for example. His consideration for tabletop is a certain level, if that makes sense, where others would look at it and be like, oh, that's not tabletop, that's way above tabletop. It's very similar to, say, for example, if you went to the Louvre, when I went to Paris and went to the Louvre Art Museum and I saw the Mona Lisa for the first time, my expectation was that it was this massive painting, blah, blah. In reality, it's this tiny little thing on the wall. It's tiny. Some people will look at that and be like, that's incredible, that's amazing, it's worth 1 point whatever billion dollars or pounds or whatever. And then someone else will look at it and go, I'm expecting it to be this 4 foot by 5 foot painting, it's blah blah, and it's not. It's this tiny little thing that can't be worth that. So it's perception of what it is, and it's perception of quality. But really, in an unregulated industry, and again, we are talking about art here. Like, miniature painting is art. It is a form of art. That's what it is. So one company's levels will be very, very different to another company's levels. And we get it all the time. Oh, I've seen, here's some reference artwork. It's from this place, blah, blah. It's their level 4 or level 3, whatever, I want it painted like this. And then we'll look at it and we'll be like, well, that isn't, it's one of the mid levels of that company or person or whatever. That's not our level, or just see vice versa. It kind of works out that way. So taking the Siege hat off and just being down as a hobbyist and painter myself, what I would say to people is look at the galleries, look at the quality in each of the galleries, look at what you are purchasing, and make an informed decision based upon what you see on their website, if that makes sense. I can't talk for other companies because I don't know them, and again, remaining as professional as possible. Like here at my business, we take super clear photos. They don't get mucked around with at all in Photoshop. They are, what you see is what you get. It's a well-painted miniature on a blank canvas background, well lit, and that is it. That's what you get from us, and hopefully, remaining as humble as physically possible. When you go on our website, that is what you see. So that's a bit about levels and a bit of an explanation about levels, but just as a consumer, go onto the website, have a very good look, and just see what it is that you're paying for, and that's the best bit of advice that I would give. You can't really compare one company to another. Obviously you can look at something and be, well, that's better painted, or that's neater, or that's sharper, or that's better than that, for example, but it's art. So they're very different. It's like trying to say to somebody, well, compare that Picasso picture against that Monet picture. Which one's better? Well, it's not that one's better or the other. It's just that one's painted a certain way, one's painted another. If it's neater and sharper, the appearance of the picture might be better, but it doesn't detract from what it is. So yeah.
And it may not evoke the same emotion. And something that's a messier painting may evoke a better emotion,
Exactly.
like and reaction. And it's interesting too. I also think our listeners should take a look at the gallery on the Seach Studios for inspiration, even if
100%.
There's a lot of high quality paint jobs on there, and things that you can aspire to. That's always one of the things we try to encourage.
100%.
Look at other painters' work. Don't discourage by it. Aspire. Don't run away.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree completely.
So, what is the biggest commission you've ever done?
Biggest, probably the Gene Stealer cult army that we done for Lawrence at Tabletop Tactics. Like it just had so many models. Like it's just like ludicrous. Like I think you're talking like 150 infantry, like eight to 10 tanks, like about 12 to 12 characters. It was just ludicrous. And on top of it, as well as obviously all the Gene Stealer cult, you've got loads of Gene Stealers to go with it as well, like Rippers and loads of things. So it's just a bonkers job. It was massive. That's just in one phase. I mean, we've got many clients that return to the business and add and top up their armies and so on and so forth. I mean, we've got one project ongoing at the moment that's a Sisters of Battle army that the first phase was big enough to be a 2,500 point army in itself, and we're on phase 7 of the army. So we've done, in 8 years we have done like crazy bonkers projects for size. We've done crazy bonkers projects for just the narrative and background behind it. Like, I'm sure anyone that knows of Siege in some form will know that we painted a Space Marine army many years ago themed after bacon. There's a couple of videos on the channel. We get crazy. The spec sheet for that project was literally a Word document, and in all the boxes that they need to put information in, rather than text, they just put pictures of pigs or rashers of bacon.
That's
fantastic. Yeah, so it's just we've had just ludicrous for just, and it's hilarious. We get to work on taking people's narrative and passion and armies and things and just turning it to 11. So it's been crazy. But yeah, the Gene Stealer cult as an individual army, the full Gene Stealer cult army, which we've done for Lawrence at Tabletop Tactics, that in itself is probably the largest physical single project army. However, we have completed armies which are like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 phases that for model count obviously dwarf that, but we've not done it all in one go, if that makes sense.
Sure, and I'm just curious now, were you guys sick of bacon or craving bacon afterwards, after, painting the bacon army?
Ben, who painted it, never wanted to. I don't think he ate bacon for about 4 weeks after he'd done the projects. So yeah, all the purity seals were rashers of bacon. So
nice. That's fantastic.
So
did you make the tip of it an egg or something? The actual wax?
Like a fried tomato kind of thing. So, there was a sergeant that was converted that had like a squeegee bottle of ketchup and was spraying it into like a bacon sandwich. So it's just we had some crazy fun with it. So yeah.
And those are the type of projects I can imagine that kind of reinvigorate too. If you're in the doldrums and you get somebody who's like, paint my Nurgle as a traveling circus. That'd probably be a lot of fun or something like that.
Yeah,
We've
had some funny things over the years, and that's the beauty of our clients and the absolute pleasure it gives us as a business to just bring people's like mad ideas to reality and fruition. It's just very funny.
So talk to me about what was the most difficult commission that you've had to do then. So you had the biggest was the Tyranids. What's the hardest one?
I don't think when I say hard, I mean purely as a result of it's also very humbling, and it's also a big mountain to climb when we have clients that approach us and go, I want the Space Marine Army, but I'm going to give you full artistic license to work on it. And it's a very much a massive compliment, because it's like they trust and believe in the business and the brand enough to allow us to just do what we do as a company. And obviously, when you dilute that down individually to the allocated painter that works on the project, it's their choice to actually decide what the army finishes as. They don't know that client. They don't know what the client likes about the background or anything at that point until that's the purpose of receiving a specification, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So when you do literally get, here's the loadout of the army, you can choose whatever colors you like. You can do whatever you like with them. You can use, blah, blah, whatever sort of iconography and all these kind of things. I think they're the more difficult projects for many reasons. And the first one being is that we have the super, humbled approach. So we're like, wow, we have to, nail this, because the client has this like incredibly, humbling belief in what we do as a business, but also at the same time making sure that we meet their expectations without them actually setting their expectations. If you follow me, I think it's a very difficult thing to have to do. So I think that's probably the most difficult thing. We've had various projects that we've had, I want a Sisters. We had a Sisters of Battle Army, which is actually that project that I'm talking about that's got 7 phases. That the client just said, look, I want a Sisters of Battle Army. Here's all the models I'm doing for the first phase. I purely want a color scheme that allows me to use all the rules in the codex. So they don't want them any of the known orders, so like Bloody Rose or any of those ones at all whatsoever, like Argent Shroud or whatever. They just purely want a color scheme which they can switch the rules out. Obviously, there must be a competitive gamer. That's perfectly understandable. So that's what I would consider, and what I think we see as a difficult task. It's difficult because we want to make sure the client is happy with the project, but it's satisfying because we've been super humbled in go crazy, guys. I firmly believe in what you can produce for me. It's the most high risk environment to be in when people are paying decent money for something they're going to keep. You know what I mean? It's a very, very, it's an honor and a pleasure to work on projects like that. And quite honestly, I would gladly take a really concise, to the point specification whereby I want an Ultramarines, a Blood Angel, Space Wolf, Howling Griffin's army with this. All of them have to have this. We would have that every day, because then it just gives us, a skeleton to just put the flesh onto, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. The ones that just go crazy, guys, we're just like, oh, what if they don't like it? And unfortunately, obviously, they've given us artistic license. So really, again, all cards on table. What we do is obviously what they have to have, but at the same time, we obviously want to make sure that they love what we're going to do for them. I would hate it. My job, apart from firefighting when there's a worldwide pandemic on, my job is to make sure that we hit customers' expectations and deliver for them projects that they're going to keep for the rest of their life. That's my job, is to satisfy customers and make sure that they are happy as a consumer and customer and client of this business. And those open specs make that job more high risk and harder, because we have to knock it out of the park every time, and that's the job, So yeah, that's what I would say is difficult.
I'm curious. So we've talked mostly about Warhammer. Do you guys do commissions outside of Warhammer, like War Machine or Hordes or Infinity or anything along those lines?
Yeah, we do, just to get that flat out. You say obviously within Warhammer, but Siege stereotypically, and it's not through me gearing it and aiming it this way over the 8 years. We're stigmatized as a 40k studio. Obviously, look, we love 40k. We're all passionate 40k lovers of the narrative, the models, the background, all those things. But we will paint anything. I've got members of the team that are massively into historicals, bolt action, the World War II models, Infinity, all these different things. I've got team members that love all of those things, and we will paint any miniatures. All right, okay. We've painted Airfix kits. We've painted loads of things over the years, like model aircraft kits. However, as a business within the wargaming industry, our core business is obviously Games Workshop 40K. That's the core business, and even with Age of Sigmar, like, I love 40K, 8 foot tall, bolter wielding Space Marines and Blood Angels. Don't get me wrong. However, I love Age of Sigmar miniatures. I think the sculpts, the quality of the design, the really awesome narrative behind it, I think they're great. And I do think that some of them are a bit better than 40K models, but we just don't get enough of them in because 40K is this leviathan of a game system that is, and again, you got to take your hat off to Games Workshop because they've created a narrative and background that is not only addictive, but people can see themselves within that narrative and warm to a certain faction. Like I love Blood Angels, or like Joe in the office loves Dark Angels, or whatever the case may be. It's the 40K narrative is more it's more in depth than I would say the vast many other narratives from even other science fictions, like, you know, like even Star Trek, Star Wars, all these kind of things. Like, as much as I love those things, 40K as a genre and as a background is immense, and that's why we are stigmatized, not through our choice as a 40K studio, but if you send us anything else, we will grab it with both hands and we will do it just to the same standard and just to the same ability. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, and let's be honest, in the hobby world and tabletop gaming world, Games Workshop is the big dog. I mean, that's they're the largest company of them all. So, you know, that's now there's no shame in that, and that's where, you know, of course, that's a market that you have to focus on because that's 100%. What's going to be, you know, and it's interesting you talked about it. I love the Stormcast Eternals. I know they get the whole Sigma right and a Sigma thing, but you know what? They were the right size before Space Marines were the right size. You know what I mean? Those were the right size first, and you know, it took a while for them to. I don't ever want to paint a pre-Primaris Marine again. I mean, I feel like once you paint a Primaris, you're like, okay, let me get rid of all those other models. This is how it should have been years ago, you know. Especially when I was looking at the old Rogue Trader stuff, I have the Rogue Trader box 1 of the Marines, and I also have some of the Imperial Guard Rogue Trader, the plastic kit. And I look, I'm like, they're the same size. You know, they're not, they shouldn't be. You know, this guy's supposed to be 8 foot tall, you know? So, but I'm right there with you. I think we need more Stormcast models too.
They are very good.
Yeah. So with that also being said, is there one of the things I ask a lot of our guests is there a model, or are there models out there that you would like to paint that haven't been made? Like I always use Stephen King's Dark Tower series. I would love to see miniatures for like the Gunslinger and all that made, and I'd love to paint those. But is there anything like out there for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's loads of rich, immersive, narrative-based backgrounds and stories and books and things like that you just, you know, you're never going to, well, not I say never, but they're going to it's going to be very difficult for them to be released as miniatures, you know, unless you develop a game around them, or unless you develop like a board game around them or something like that. Like, I think because I am a GW fanboy, and I'll always admit this. Like, you know, I am a huge Games Workshop fanboy. You know, and that is I don't personally. I painted the odd bust or the odd Infinity model, but I don't really go outside of that, or I'll pick up like an Airfix kit or something. So, I wouldn't say that there's any from narrative that, you know, that I like that haven't been released personally. Like I've painted some of the Star Wars Legion models, like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, all those kind of things. They're really cool models. But I don't get the appeal that I get from 40K models, being frank. Like that, I think that for me, and this is just me personally, there needs to be some connection to the miniature for me to enjoy painting it personally. Like, you know, in the sense of, for me personally, not for a commission, but for me personally. So, I haven't painted any of the Marvel Crisis Protocol models. They look great, and I love obviously Marvel and all that kind. But I don't have a connection to painting them, if that makes sense. You know, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I think there's some
That makes
Star Trek.
sense.
There's some Star Trek models that I probably would love to see. Like I would love, and they are released to say to an extent, which isn't directly answering your question. Like the USS Defiant is one of my favorite ships from Star Trek from DS9. Like I'd love to do a model of that. You know, within the realms of the narrative that I love, like, yeah, there's characters that I would love to paint that haven't got miniatures, that haven't been released, you know, or haven't had updated models in a very, very long time, you know. But, you know, the models will come for those. You just have to be patient, you know. It's just, you know, it's part of the lovely thing that we get delivered every month is loads and loads of new toys from Games Workshop.
Right.
So,
and everything slowed down because of the pandemic. I know
yeah,
there's
exactly.
a lot of releases, you know, and I get the personal connection thing. I have a bunch of Chaos models that I sold because I just was looking at them and they just don't appeal to me. But somebody was very happy to buy them off of me, and
exactly.
well, it was a trade for store credit thing that went on, and so I went and used that store credit and bought models I wanted to paint. So it's
exactly.
a free market and its finest, right? So one of the things we do when we kind of wrap up interviews is the motto of the podcast is better, braver, happier. Can you give our listeners some advice as they continue their journeys on that path?
100 million%. Yeah. I am super passionate about pushing people as hard as possible when it comes to painting. I think there's a very good acronym which I use a lot, which is the word F.E.A.R, which is false expectations appearing real. Okay. And a lot of people have, and it's not like you're scared of, like, you know, death or anything crazy like that, but it's almost, and I don't want to belittle anxiety. That's not the angle that I'm going for here. But what I mean is that people will see a model that they really like and they'll go, oh, I'm not good enough to paint that. Okay. Rather than looking at that miniature and going, that model's incredible, I love it, I'm going to paint it and I'm going to push myself as hard as possible on it, if that makes sense. You know, I think a lot of people that don't have that jump off a cliff mindset when it comes to that fight or flight, when it comes to it, should really just, you're not, like, what is the worst that's going to happen? Yes, you could potentially muck up or ruin a model that you spent X amount of dollars or pounds on, if that makes sense. Okay, you could potentially, but if you're refined and careful and consistent, and you take your time with it, and you just really concentrate on the mindset of, I must paint the best I can, your results, because you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, which is something obviously I've spoken about already, that will give you, mitigate and reduce the risk of those false expectations becoming real rather than appearing real, if that makes sense. Yeah. So my biggest bit of advice to anybody, any painters out there that are listening to this, that want to improve their painting, is to not have fear or anxiety of a sort towards picking a model up that they've always wanted to paint, but they've been too worried or scared or anxious to paint because they feel they're going to do a poor job on it. As long as your mindset when you approach that miniature is, I've got to paint this the best I can, I've got to do everything as carefully and as refined as possible. Yeah, nothing negative is going to happen to me. I'm not going to lose a limb, or I'm not going to, die, or any crazy thing like that. The worst that can happen is that you paint it to your current ability. That is the worst that can happen. Yeah. However, with that mindset of, I'm going to do this the best I can and really trying to make this the neatest, the sharpest, the most refined, the smoothest, the best blended, all those kind of things. Yeah. You will always grow as a painter. Always. And one of the greatest challenges that I set myself as a painter, entering into Golden Demon many years ago, was I always wanted to do a squad. I'd always wanted to do a squad of Honor Guard, Blood Angels Honor Guard. Yeah. Okay. And I said to myself, I'm going to paint every single one with the mindset that I'm not allowed to make a mistake, and I've got to be as neat and as sharp and as best that I can. Yeah. And in that one piece, those 5 models in that squad, I learned more and grew more as a painter because of putting myself outside of my comfort zone and current painting ability by going, I've got to be better than I currently am, if that makes sense. And when you incorporate into that the process of, I'm going to do some freehand on it, I'm going to do some blending that looks like NMM, I'm going to do some this on it, or I'm going to do this on it. when you start incorporating those things, like, for example, two of them have got bare heads. I was like, I'm going to paint the best flesh and the best faces that I've ever done. And I'm going to really put effort into it. The moment you put yourself outside your comfort zone, you will start growing as a painter. Never, ever, ever have fear or be anxious about painting a miniature because you think you're going to ruin it. The worst thing that's going to happen is, yes, you might paint it to your current ability or make a mistake, but it's not the end of the world. And it's more about learning from mistakes and issues that you make than anything else. That is the greatest gift that painting something outside your comfort zone will give you, is the ability to grow and learn from mistakes, if you follow me. And the worst case is if you are worried and you've got a friend who humbly is a better painter than you, and you can easily admit, look, John, Tim, whoever, you're one of my good friends, you're a better painter than me. Do you mind me sending you photos and giving me advice on where I need to improve on this or what I need to do better as I'm painting it? Do you mind that? No, I'm your friend. Of course I'm going to help you. So with those two things, just go at things and attack them without any fear or reservation of making that mistake, or your expectations become your false expectations of making mistakes or doing something bad becoming real, because they genuinely won't with that, if you have the right mindset and approach it with that fashion. And that's how I would say it. Sorry to go on.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. No, I really appreciate it. It's always, many artists say very similar things, but they say them in different ways, which reaches different audiences and touches different people. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, one of the things that people can never hear too much of is that you should fail and fail hard, because that's how you learn the best.
Yeah.
That's how you learn. But those are just type of things that should be. I need to hear them, over and over as a painter myself. So, at least at some level, they're being, somebody's being reached, right? But
I hope so. Yeah, I genuinely hope so.
So, James, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let you know that we'll have in our show notes and all over our social media, we'll have links to Siege Studios, and I also believe you have a Patreon as well.
Yeah, we do. We obviously, because of the pandemic, we've started doing online tuition to compensate for obviously not doing physical classes here in the UK. And we get a lot of people ask us about, do you do like tuition classes in other countries, which we haven't been able to do over the past couple of years, when we could do classes, and it just gives us the ability to teach people internationally, which I think is good. So
that's wonderful. Absolutely. So, yeah, no, and it's funny because we started a podcast with the thought process that we were going to start doing convention hopping here in the U.S. And we started in January of last year, and we went, don't, not happening,
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for having me on the show. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you very much to all your listeners for taking interest and to listening to me, rabbit on about this industry. so a big thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here for sure. Dan and I would like to thank James from Siege Studios for joining us today and telling us about his painting journey and how the world of COVID has affected him, the business, and all those other things, wonderful things that are going on. Check out Siege Studios on Instagram and Facebook just by searching under their names. We'll also put links in the show description. So thank you again, James. We look forward to talking to you again in the future. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Listening to Paint Dry. You can also follow us on Twitter at Dry Painting, and also send us a line if you have any questions, want to see anything in the show, tell us how we're doing and what you're working on at listeningtopaintdry@gmail.com. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from you all. You can also like, subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcasts from, and that includes everything from Audio Junkie, Amazon, Apple, all over the place. Also, if you could stop, leave us a review, that would be wonderful. That would really help us out a lot. Becoming a better, braver, happier painter is a challenge, but I'm really confident that you can all do it. So until next time. Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan is a production of LTPTWMD. All rights reserved. No portion of this recording may be used without the express written consent of the host. The music is Death by a Thousand Questions by Springtide. Download from the Free Music Archive on a non-commercial attribution share-alike basis. All views and opinions expressed in the show are solely the views and opinions of the person who said them. All celebrity voices, if any, were impersonated and done so poorly.